Imagine the sound of hooves clattering on cobblestone at dusk. The air is damp, heavy with wood smoke and the faint stench of tallow candles guttering in crooked windows. The streets are narrow, their stones slick with rain and worse, runoff from chamber pots flung out with a shouted warning no one bothers to heed. Above you, timbered houses lean so close they almost touch, as if conspiring to blot out the last light of day. This is Europe in the waning centuries of the Middle Ages. A place where every breath carries the weight of survival, where pain and hunger linger like uninvited guests in every home. The year might be 1325, or 1410, or any year in between, because here, time is less a steady march forward than a dim, smoky haze, broken only by the toll of the church bell. And yet, in this darkness, people dream. They drink, they pray, they dance, they whisper of saints and witches, of visions and demons. They find small mercies in herbs gathered from the hedgerow, in draughts that blur pain with dangerous sweetness, in rituals that blur the boundary between earth and the other world. Tonight, we will walk among them. We will breathe their air, taste their bread, shiver beside their hearths. We will slip through monasteries where fasting monks see angels in the smoke, and into taverns where peasants reel in a frenzy of ergot-fed visions. We will glimpse noblewomen widening their eyes with belladonna, even as their beauty brings them closer to madness. We will hear children lulled into silence with syrups strong enough to still their breath forever. This was a world where reality itself was porous, where the line between pain and ecstasy, prayer and hallucination, miracle and poison was never certain. A world where survival often meant surrendering to illusion. So come, step with me into the shadowed heart of medieval Europe, where every candle flame might hide a vision, every cup of wine might hold a dream, and every night might bring you face to face with angels, or demons. You follow the tolling bell, its iron voice rolling across the town, pulling us deeper into the crooked alleys. The stones beneath our feet glisten, and a rat darts across the gutter ahead, its wet fur catching the faint glow of a torch fixed to the wall. The people we pass are pale, gaunt, moving with the weight of constant fatigue. It is here, among them, that the strange theater of medieval medicine unfolds. If you were sick in this world, you would not call for a physician in the way we imagine today. There were no gleaming clinics, no clean white sheets, no steady hands armed with precise knowledge. Instead, medicine was a matter of theories as old as Galen and Hippocrates, ideas carried across centuries, polished and distorted, wrapped in prayers and ritual. The body, they believed, was governed by four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These humors, as they were called, shaped not only your health but your very temperament. Too much blood, they thought, and you would be hot-tempered, rash, quick to violence. Too much black bile, and you would sink into melancholy, your soul weighted down as if by lead. Illness, then, was not the invasion of unseen microbes but the imbalance of these inner tides. The task of the healer was not to destroy a germ, they did not know such things existed, but to restore harmony. Imagine it. You wake in the morning with a burning fever, your skin slick with sweat, your lips cracked and parched. A physician, summoned by desperate family, enters your dim hut. He wears not white linen but robes of dark wool, perhaps with a fur trim if he is well off, the hem frayed and thick with mud from the road. Around his neck, a pouch of herbs to ward off bad air, for sickness was thought to drift invisibly in miasmas, foul vapors exhaled from swamps, graves, or sinful bodies. He sits by your bed, frowning, not at germs but at the map of your face, the texture of your tongue, the smell of your sweat. He will ask when you last relieved yourself. He may study the color of your urine, holding the vial against the sunlight if there is any to spare. Pale yellow? Perhaps excess phlegm. Deep red? Too much blood. Cloudy black? The humors are in chaos. And his treatment, oh, it is as grim as the diagnosis. A lancet gleams faintly in the smoky light. Bloodletting, the oldest of remedies. The idea is simple. If there is too much blood, let it out. The vein is pierced, the crimson stream collected in a bowl, sometimes marked with neat lines to show how much should be drained. Weakness is expected, faintness almost desirable, proof that the imbalance is easing. Many died not of their illness but of this very cure. But in a world where medicine was half ritual, half desperation, even death seemed like part of the bargain. And then there were the drafts. Opium, when it could be procured from far-off lands, ground fine and mixed with honeyed wine. Mandrake root, dug from the earth with fear and ceremony, for legend said its scream could drive men mad. Henbane, its mottled leaves steeped into bitter infusions. Belladonna, whose berries glistened like drops of nightshade, promising both relief and ruin. These plants could dull pain, yes, but they could also twist the mind into strange visions, or still the breath altogether. Picture a child writhing in the grip of fever, his cries filling the cramped hut. The mother begs the physician for mercy. He dips a finger into a small clay pot, lifting a paste of crushed poppy and herbs, and smears it across the child's lips. Slowly, the cries falter, replaced by a heavy silence. The parents weep with gratitude, for at last their son is quiet, at peace. But peace and death in this world were not far apart. Do you see the irony? In a time where remedies were few, where every cure risked becoming a poison, medicine became as much about ritual comfort as about healing. The physician's role was to act, to give the family the sense that something, anything, was being done. A prayer murmured over the bed. A candle lit beside a relic. A charm tied to the wrist. In their world, belief itself was part of the cure. And yet, amid the fumbling and the superstition, there were moments of strange, fragile brilliance. Some healers learned that certain herbs eased pain more gently than others. That sage soothed throats, that chamomile calmed the belly, that garlic pressed into wounds seemed to draw out the rot. Fragments of real healing shimmered in the murk of error. But these were needles in the haystack of humoral theory, and few knew how close they had stumbled to truth. Walk with me now beyond the hut, into the heart of the town. The apothecary's shop waits at the corner, its shelves lined with jars of powders and resins, dried leaves tied in bundles. The air inside is thick, pungent with rosemary, fennel, and the acrid tang of camphor. Behind the counter, a man grinds in his mortar, the pestle thumping like a slow heartbeat. He knows his wares are as much for the mind as for the body. Take this, he says, sliding a small vial across the wood. A draught to cool the heat of the blood. Inside is a concoction of wine and herbs, bitter enough to sting the tongue. The sufferer drinks, grimacing, but soon the warmth of alcohol softens the pain, and a dreamy haze steals across the mind. They feel better for a time. Not cured, perhaps, but soothed. And sometimes that was enough. But not always. Too much, and the haze deepens into stupor, into silence. A dose meant to heal could become a final sleep. Families knew this, and yet, they gave thanks. Better their loved ones slip away gently under the lull of poppy than scream through the night in agony. Poison and mercy, indistinguishable. How strange, to us who live in a world of pills and sterile syringes, to imagine medicine so entangled with death. But in their world, suffering was constant, unrelenting. A toothache could kill you. A cough could hollow your chest until you gasped your last. Pain was not the exception but the rule. And so any moment of respite, however fleeting, felt like grace. Now, as the church bell tolls again in the distance, we step back into the night. The streets are darker now, the torches fewer, the shadows deeper. Behind one shuttered window, a woman groans, her family gathered close. Inside, a physician bends over her, muttering a prayer as he readies his instruments. A bowl, a blade, a cloth to catch what must be released. The air is thick with incense, masking the sharper odors of sickness. You pause at the window, listening. The words of Galen, of Hippocrates, echo in this room as if they were scripture. Balance, equilibrium, the sacred order of humors. In truth, they are groping in the dark. But to the family, to the neighbors who wait outside, this ritual is more than medicine. It is hope. And in a world so starved of hope, sometimes the ritual mattered more than the cure. The night deepens. We move on, away from the cries, toward the faint glow of another fire. Somewhere, a healer prepares a different remedy, a smoke of herbs, to be inhaled by the sick. Wormwood, sage, juniper cast onto the coals, their fragrant fumes rising. The patient breathes, coughs, perhaps feels their head lighten, their senses blur. Is it healing? Or only a vision carried on smoke? In the Middle Ages, the difference was never certain. And so we walk through this world where physicians hold no true remedies, where every cure is a gamble between comfort and poison. Ahead, a monastery looms, its stone walls stark against the moonlit sky. Inside, monks kneel in prayer, fasting, inhaling incense until visions flicker before their eyes. What they see, angel or hallucination, will shape the fate of saints and sinners alike. Come. Let us step through the gates, into the cloister's shadows, where medicine ends and visions begin. The monastery walls fall behind us, their chants echoing like fading ripples on water, and we return once more to the night streets. The air outside feels colder now, or perhaps it is only the hush of the hour pressing closer. A dog barks in the distance, a thin, hungry sound. Smoke curls from a few scattered chimneys, carrying the acrid perfume of peat and damp wood. Behind each shutter, lives play out in rhythms both ordinary and terrible. Step quietly, for here is where we begin to see the true intimacy of medieval remedies. Not in the cloisters where monks record visions of angels, not in the apothecary where jars gleam with powders and oils, but in the hearth-lit rooms of families, where desperation softened into acceptance, and poisons became the kindest gifts. Inside one such hut, imagine a mother kneeling beside her daughter. The girl's skin is waxen, her breast shallow, each exhale rattling like wine through dry reeds. The physician has already come and gone, leaving nothing but a muttered prayer and a small packet of dried herbs. The family knows what he dared not say aloud. There will be no recovery. The fever will not break. The body is already slipping away. And so the mother opens her pouch. Inside, crushed seeds of henbane, their scent sharp and earthy. She mixes them into a cup of warm ale, stirring until the bitter tang vanishes beneath the sweetness of honey. She lifts the cup to her daughter's lips. The girl drinks slowly, her trembling hand guided by her mother's own. Within minutes, the tension eases from her brow. The pain that twisted her body into knots ebbs away, and she sighs, the first sigh of peace in weeks. The family weeps, not in fear but in gratitude. For tonight, there will be no more screams. This is the paradox of mercy. They know the draught may be her last. They know that the same roots that soothe pain may also still the heart. Yet in their world, relief itself is a miracle worth the risk. Walk with me further. The night opens into another home, this one larger, its beams blackened by years of smoke. An old man lies in bed, his face drawn tight with agony. His son kneels beside him, a wooden cup in hand. He whispers, "Forgive me, father, but I cannot let you suffer so." The cup holds a stronger mix, poppy resin dissolved in wine, thick and dark. The old man drinks, and soon his eyes grow heavy. He drifts into silence, lips parted in something like a smile. When morning comes, he does not wake. His son buries him with trembling hands, torn between sorrow and the quiet knowledge that he has spared his father's last hours of torment. Such stories were not rare. Across Europe, in cottages and even in castles, families turned to the same plants: mandrake, henbane, nightshade, poppy. To some, they were healing herbs. To others, they were the devil's tools. And to many, they were simply the only mercy left. Imagine the weight of that decision. In a world where every life was shadowed by hunger, plague, and accident, To choose mercy through poison was not cruelty. It was love made dangerous. It was a mother's trembling hand, a father's whispered prayer, a brother's desperate promise. And it was always done in secret, for the Church looked upon such acts with suspicion. To hasten death, even out of compassion, was to risk one's soul. Yet families did it all the same. But mercy was not always private. At times, whole communities gathered around the dying. In some villages, women skilled in herbs, midwives, healers, sometimes branded as witches, were called upon to prepare the draught. These women knew the measures by instinct. How much poppy to dull pain without stopping the breath, how many drops of belladonna could widen the eyes without sending the soul to the grave. They worked in shadows, their knowledge half respected, half feared. To some, they were angels. To others, conspirators with demons. Picture one such woman, an old healer wrapped in a patched cloak, sitting by the fire as she grinds seeds into powder. The family watches, silent, as her hands move with ritual precision. She mutters charms under her breath. Whether prayers or spells, no one dares to ask. She stirs the powder into a cup, hands it over, and waits. The sick man drinks. His face softens. His groans fade. Hours later, he lies still, at peace. The healer gathers her things and slips away, leaving the family to their grief and their gratitude. By morning, whispers spread. Some call her a saint. Others call her a witch. But all agree, she gave the dying man peace. And so poison walked hand in hand with love. Step back with me now into the castle halls, where nobility faced their own torments. Imagine a lord struck down by infection in his leg. The surgeon has cut, bled, cauterized, all in vain. The limb festers. The pain is unbearable. His wife pleads for help, but the physicians shake their heads. At last, she herself prepares a draught of wine laced with opium, pressing it to her husband's lips. He drinks, sighs, and drifts into darkness. His courtiers will record that he passed peacefully, a noble death. They will not write of the poison, nor of the mercy it carried. This quiet pact between families and death shaped countless endings. And it lingered in memory, passed down in whispers. Old women told their granddaughters which roots to gather, which berries to crush, which draughts would ease pain, and which would end it. This knowledge was both blessing and curse. In times of need, it saved the suffering. In times of fear, it condemned women to the stake. Do you see the shadow that falls across these acts? Mercy through poison was never only mercy. It was always haunted by suspicion, by the gaze of priests and neighbors. The line between compassion and sin was perilously thin. But still, people crossed it, again and again, for love was stronger than fear. The bell tolls once more, calling the faithful to midnight prayers. And as its echo fades, we step out of these homes, these huts and chambers where poison became mercy, into the chill of the night air. Ahead, the monastery looms again. Inside, monks fast, chant, and breathe the smoke of incense until visions swim before their eyes. For here, in these cloisters, the line between poison and revelation blurs still further. Come, let us walk into the cloister's shadows, where the air itself can make a man see angels. The air changes as we leave the huts behind. The smoke of peat and the acrid tang of herbs give way to the heavy stillness of stone. A monastery rises before us, its walls pale in the moonlight, its towers silent but for the faint chant seeping through cracks in the shutters. We step across the threshold, and suddenly the world grows hushed, as if sound itself is wary of these cloisters. Inside, the atmosphere is thick with incense. Sweet resin curls into the air, mingling with the faint musk of wool robes and damp stone. Candles flicker in iron sconces, throwing long shadows along the vaulted arches. This is a place meant to be holy, ordered, serene. And yet, within these walls, men are fighting battles not with sword or pestilence, but with their own minds, and the visions that creep unbidden through smoke, hunger, and prayer. Imagine a monk seated on the cold flagstones, his body hunched with exhaustion. He has not eaten since dawn, save for a crust of bread and watered ale. His lips are cracked, his skin pale beneath the tonsure. 4 days he has fasted, seeking to purify himself, to sharpen his soul until it can pierce the veil between earth and heaven. The incense swirls, blurring the edges of the chapel. His eyelids flutter. Suddenly, light floods his vision, not from candle or sun, but from within. An angel, he believes, stands before him. Its voice is thunder wrapped in silk, its face a brilliance he cannot bear to look upon. Tears stream down his cheeks as he collapses, whispering prayers, convinced he has touched the divine. But was it divine? Or was it the faintness of hunger, the hallucinatory edge of sleep deprivation, the smoke of frankincense mingling with his starved brain? In the Middle Ages, no one doubted. To see visions was to be chosen, marked, sanctified. The accounts of such experiences filled the pages of monastic diaries, copied carefully by candlelight. Angels descending, demons lurking, Christ himself bleeding upon the walls. Some saw hellfire opening beneath the stones. Others swore they felt the kiss of heaven upon their brow. Picture Brother Thomas of Clairvaux, who wrote of wrestling with demons in his cell. Night after night, he claimed, shadowy figures clawed at him, whispering temptations, their bodies both grotesque and alluring. He resisted with psalms, beating his chest until bruises blossomed beneath his habit. To his brothers, he was holy. To us, he may seem a man racked by fever, by hallucination, by suppressed desire fermenting in the silence of cloistered nights. And what of the women? In convents, visions were often even more vivid. Sisters recorded dreams in which Christ appeared as a bridegroom, offering rings of gold or, in one infamous case, of his own flesh. The line between mystical union and forbidden desire blurred dangerously. Yet these visions, too, were cherished, celebrated, written into hagiographies as proof of divine favor. Do you feel the weight of it? To live in such silence, to wake at midnight for prayers, to eat little, sleep little, and breathe incense daily, it was a recipe for visions. Modern medicine would call it sensory deprivation, fasting-induced hallucination, perhaps even ergot hidden in the bread. But to the medieval mind, it was proof of contact with heaven. Come with me deeper into the cloister. Listen, the chant of Compline rises, voices low and resonant, vibrating in the chest. The monks kneel, their bodies swaying gently, their eyes glazed with exhaustion. In this state, dreams and waking blur. One brother lifts his head suddenly, eyes wide. He sees, he swears he sees, the Virgin Mary stepping from the shadows, her robes luminous, her hands outstretched. He gasps, falls to the floor, and the chant falters as the others look on in awe. Tomorrow, the abbot will record this as a miracle. But outside, in the village, whispers twist such stories. Not all believe these visions are from God. Some mutter that demons cloak themselves in beauty to deceive the pious. Others wonder if the monks breathe too deeply of their own incense. And in darker corners, some accuse, perhaps these visions are nothing more than madness, or the indulgence of men driven half-wild by isolation. And yet, the power of these visions cannot be denied. A single revelation could change the course of a monastery, even of a region. There were abbots who claimed visions of saints ordering them to build new chapels, and soon pilgrims would arrive, their coins filling the coffers. There were nuns who saw Christ bleeding, and their relics became sights of wonder, drawing the faithful from miles away. Vision, hallucination, miracle, the words blurred until no one dared separate them. Picture yourself in such a place. It is the middle of the night. You kneel in the chapel, the floor cold beneath your knees, your stomach hollow with fasting. The smoke coils thickly, stinging your eyes. The chant echoes, deep and slow, a sound that seems to vibrate through your very bones. You close your eyes. And suddenly, is that music? Soft, celestial, rising not from human throats, but from somewhere beyond. You open your eyes and for an instant you swear the walls themselves are alive with light. Perhaps it is the flicker of candles. Perhaps it is something more. In this world you would not doubt. You would believe. And belief was everything. For visions could heal, inspire, terrify. A monk struck by vision might be revered as a saint, his words sought by kings and peasants alike. Another, plagued by darker visions, might be accused of consorting with demons, his life ending in chains or flame. The stakes were immense. And so men and women walked the fine line between ecstasy and madness, their experiences shaping the faith of thousands. Even the highest of the church were not immune. Bishops recorded dreams of Christ commanding them to act. Popes spoke of visions that guided their decrees. In a world where heaven and hell seemed so near, to breathe smoke and see angels was not strange. It was expected. Yet not every vision was holy. Some monks wrote of creatures with twisted faces, shadows that slithered across walls, voices that mocked and tempted. The line between angel and demon was never clear. A single vision could be hailed as divine one day and condemned as heresy the next. The fate of the visionary hung on interpretation. Step with me into a small side chapel. Here a young monk kneels, trembling. He has seen something, he cannot say what. Light and shadow twisted together, a figure with wings and claws, a face both beautiful and terrible. He tells his abbot, voice shaking, and the abbot frowns. Is this a gift of God? Or a snare of Satan? The monk himself does not know. He prays harder, fasts longer, until his body wastes and his mind burns with fever. His visions grow more frequent, more terrible. And in the end, his brothers bury him in silence, unsure whether he was saint or sinner. This was the peril of monastic visions. They could elevate or destroy, sanctify or condemn. And always, they revealed the fragility of minds pushed to their limits by hunger, smoke, and solitude. The chant fades. The monks disperse, their bare feet whispering across the stone. The incense lingers, curling through the night air like ghostly fingers. We step outside once more, into the chill darkness. Above us, the stars burn faintly, indifferent to the struggles below. And now, as we leave the cloister, we carry with us the sense of a world where visions walk hand in hand with faith. A world where to breathe smoke and see angels was as real as the stones beneath our feet. Ahead, the path turns toward firelight and laughter, for not all smoke was holy. In the villages, in the homes of peasants, herbs and fumes were burned not for visions of heaven, but for ritual, protection, and escape. Come, let us follow the smoke once more, not the sacred incense of monks, but the sage, wormwood, and wild herbs of hearth and festival. For here, in the common world, smoke itself was a ritual, a doorway into other states of being. The night air tastes different once we leave the monastery. The incense clings to us still, as though the cloister's walls have breathed their fragrance into our very clothes. But now it mingles with rougher, earthier scents. The smoke of dung fires and peat, the faint sweetness of damp hay, the musk of goats huddled close against the cold. We walk through the lanes of a village, narrow and crooked, where the glow of hearths flickers behind half-closed shutters. And here, beyond the ordered chants of monks, smoke takes on another life entirely. In these homes, fire is survival. But it is also ritual, protection, and sometimes illusion. A handful of herbs tossed onto glowing embers can change the mood of an entire night. Sage, wormwood, rosemary, juniper, their smoke curls not only through the rafters but through the minds of those who breathe it. Step into one of these huts with me. The floor is packed earth, the roof low, the beams thick with soot. A family sits close to the hearth, the flames their only shield against the gnawing dark. The mother takes a bundle of dried sage, tied with twine, and casts it into the fire. Instantly, the air fills with sharp fragrance, a cleansing bitterness that bites at the nostrils. She murmurs a prayer as the smoke coils upward, believing it will chase away spirits, sickness, and misfortune. The children watch, eyes wide, soot shadows dancing across their cheeks. They do not doubt, the smell itself feels like armor, a wall invisible but real. Such rituals were woven into daily life. Wormwood burned in the corners of rooms, to ward off plague and evil eye. Juniper smoldered in stables, its smoke believed to protect livestock from sickness. Even the church, which frowned on superstition, adopted fumigation in its own way, incense thick enough to make priests faint at the altar. In the medieval imagination, smoke carried prayers upward, like whispers rising to heaven on invisible wings. But it did more than carry prayers. It altered minds. Imagine long winter nights, the air close and heavy, the fire banked beneath a mound of ash, and herbs smoldering slowly. Those who sat close breathed deeply. The bitter edge of wormwood blurred their senses. The sweetness of burning resin lulled them into trance. A child half asleep by the fire whispered that she saw shapes in the smoke, saints, angels, or perhaps demons. The family leaned in, half fearful, half enthralled. Was it only imagination? Or had the herbs opened a door between worlds? Not only peasants believed so. Physicians, too, prescribed fumigations. A patient racked with fever might be seated over a pot of steaming herbs, the vapors inhaled as medicine. Rosemary for the chest, sage for the throat, lavender for the nerves. The treatment was as much ritual as science, but sometimes it worked. Sometimes the sharp oils in the herbs cleared the lungs, calmed the stomach, eased the restless mind. And when it did not, at least the patient believed something had been done. In an age of helplessness, belief itself was a balm. Think of the festivals. On midsummer nights, fires blazed on hilltops, herbs cast into the flames until sparks rained upward like stars. People danced through the smoke, laughing, shrieking, convinced it cleansed them of sin, sickness, and sorrow. The air was thick with fragrance and frenzy. Some swore that the herbs burned away not only disease but bad luck, leaving them renewed, almost reborn. Picture the feast of St. John, when villagers leapt over bonfires, wreaths of mugwort on their brows, rosemary sprigs clutched in their hands. To us, it may seem like celebration, like play. But to them, it was serious magic. The smoke wrapped them, sanctified them, carried them into a space where body and spirit mingled. They emerged soot-streaked, hair-singed, laughing, but beneath the laughter was the relief of knowing they had been protected for another year. And sometimes, smoke was used not for protection, but for vision. Herbalists knew that henbane leaves, when burned, released fumes that clouded the senses, made limbs heavy, and minds wander. Some who inhaled them swore they felt their souls lift from their bodies, drifting above the rafters, flying into the night. Was it flight? Or only the dizzy swirl of hallucination? In those smoky chambers, the difference hardly mattered. Step with me into the hut of a village healer. She crouches beside the fire, her face shadowed by the flames. Around her, bundles of herbs hang from the rafters, sage, rue, vervain, each tied with string. Tonight she prepares a ritual. A neighbor's child has been seized by fits, his body racked with spasms. The villagers whisper of demons. The healer burns a mixture of wormwood and frankincense, chanting as the smoke thickens. The child breathes it in, coughing at first, then falling into a strange stillness. His eyes flutter, his limbs relax. The family gasps. Is this a cure? Or only a pause, a fragile mercy granted by smoke? Such moments blur the lines between medicine, magic, and faith. For the medieval world did not divide them as we do. Smoke could be prayer, could be medicine, could be enchantment. And often, it was all three at once. Consider too the soldiers. Before battle, some drank wine laced with herbs, others burned mandrake or cannabis, inhaling the fumes until fear dulled and frenzy took hold. They marched into combat not only with swords but with smoke in their lungs, convinced it made them braver, stronger, less mortal. And perhaps it did, though it also made them reckless, unpredictable, as likely to turn their blades on friend as on foe. The Church condemned much of this, branding it superstition, witchcraft. And yet the Church itself filled its cathedrals with incense so heavy it blurred vision, dulled thought, softened hearts. To walk into such a space was to enter a haze of scent and light, where the boundary between heaven and earth seemed fragile, transparent. Was it so different from the peasant's hut, where sage smoked in the fire and children dreamed of angels in the rafters? The truth is this: in the Middle Ages, smoke was a bridge between body and spirit, between earth and heaven, between life and death. It carried prayers, soothed pains, summoned visions. It was feared, cherished, condemned, and adored. Step outside once more. The village sleeps, its huts dark, but the faint threads of smoke still rise from every chimney, drifting upward into the starlit sky. Each curl carries with it a prayer, a fear, a hope. Each curl is part of the invisible fabric that bound medieval lives to forces they could not see but deeply felt. And as we walk on, leaving the village behind, the air grows colder, sharper. Ahead, the path winds toward another kind of smoke, one born of ointments and potions, whispered about in fear and fascination. Women who gathered herbs at night, who brewed salves that made bodies feel as though they soared through the air. Healers, midwives, or witches. Let us go there now, into the secret places where women mixed herbs and oils, and where smoke and salve became wings for the soul. The smoke of sage and wormwood drifts away behind us, curling upward into the night sky like faded prayers. The village grows quiet, its fires dimming, its doors barred against the cold and the dark. But somewhere beyond the fields, in the margins where paths grow thin and trees lean close, another kind of work begins. For when the hearth fires burn low, women step into the night, gathering what the earth offers under the gaze of moon and star. Imagine her, a figure cloaked against the chill, stooping among the hedgerows, hands brushing the damp earth. She knows where the henbane grows, its mottled leaves bitter to the touch. She knows the pale blossoms of belladonna, the roots of mandrake twisted like tiny human forms, the stalks of wild poppy heavy with seeds. To her, the land is a living apothecary, every plant whispering its secrets if only you learn to listen. By day, she is called a midwife, a healer, perhaps simply Old Mother So-and-so, by her neighbors. She tends births, soothes fevers, eases aching joints with poultices of herbs and oils. She burns rosemary to chase away pestilence, brews teas of chamomile to calm troubled sleep. People come to her quietly, with coins or eggs or scraps of bread in payment, and she does what she can. But by night, by night, the whispers begin. For some of the herbs she gathers do not simply heal. They transform. Mixed into ointments with fat and oil, belladonna and henbane create sensations that defy reason. A smear upon the skin, and suddenly the body feels light, the ground slipping away, the soul soaring above the rooftops. Those who use such salves speak of flight, of riding through the night on broom or branch, of joining secret gatherings beneath the moon. The Church calls it witchcraft. Neighbors whisper of Sabbaths and demons. But the science hidden in these stories is stranger still. For the alkaloids in belladonna and henbane seep through the skin, warping perception, slowing the body while freeing the mind. Dreams bleed into waking, and the sensation of flying is as real as the rough straw beneath your bed. Women who anoint themselves with these ointments awaken with memories of soaring above fields, of feasting in strange halls, of dancing in circles no one else can see. Were they witches? Or simply the first travelers of the imagination, guided by the chemistry of herbs? Step into her cottage with me. The roof sags with soot, the hearth smolders, and bundles of herbs hang from every beam. The air is thick with scents both sweet and acrid, lavender beside henbane, rosemary beside mandrake. She crouches by the fire, grinding roots into powder with the steady rhythm of her mortar. Into the mixture she stirs rendered fat, creating a thick, dark ointment. She does not name it aloud, for words carry power, and walls have ears. But she knows what it will do. A knock comes at her door. A young woman enters, eyes swollen from weeping. Her child has cried for nights unending, feverish, restless. She begs for help. The healer offers a small vial of syrup, poppy, honey, a whisper of opium. Enough, perhaps, to give the child sleep. The mother clutches it like a relic, pressing coins into the healer's hand. She will never tell the priest where she got it. But when the child sleeps soundly at last, she will give thanks. So it goes, again and again. Women with knowledge of herbs walk the line between savior and sinner. For every grateful family, there is another who watches with suspicion. A cow falls ill? Perhaps the healer's herbs failed, or perhaps she cursed it. A child dies in the night? Was it the fever, or the syrup she gave? In times of fear, gratitude curdles quickly into accusation. And yet people return. For who else knows how to ease childbirth, when screams echo through the night and death hovers near? The healer's hands guide mothers through agony. Her herbs dull the worst of the pain. Her whispered prayers give courage. She is the unseen guardian of life, and for that, she is both revered and feared. Consider how narrow the path she walks. One day, she is a midwife, praised for saving a child and mother. The next, she is a witch, accused of binding men's lust or summoning storms. The same ointment that eases pain might also bring visions of flight. The same smoke that calms fevers might also summon spirits. It is not the herb itself, but the story told about it that decides her fate. Let me tell you of one such story. In a village in Germany, a healer was accused of witchcraft after a group of children claimed they saw her riding through the air on a broom. The truth, whispered later, was simpler. She had given them ointments to ease their fevers, and they had dreamed of flying. But dreams were enough. She was dragged before a tribunal, questioned until her voice broke, her words twisted into confession. The ointment was called proof, the children's visions evidence. She was burned beneath the same sky she once imagined flying through. Such tales multiplied. Inquisitors recorded them carefully, writing of witches who smeared themselves with salves, who flew to Sabbaths where they feasted and danced with demons. Yet read closely, and you see the language of hallucination. Strange foods, strange music, sensations of floating, of transformation, all the marks of herbs slipping across the threshold of the mind. What the women felt as flight, the church condemned as sorcery. And yet, beneath the fear and fire, the practical work continued. Women still gathered herbs, still brewed teas, still delivered babies. Their knowledge was too necessary to lose. And so they lived in tension, celebrated in whispers, condemned in public, forever balancing on the edge of survival. Step outside with me now, into the night fields. The moon is high, silvering the hedgerows. Somewhere, a healer moves quietly, her hands brushing the plants, her mind reciting their names like prayers. Each leaf, each root, each seed carries both poison and cure. To know them is power. To use them is risk. To share them is to invite gratitude and danger. This is the world of the women healers. Not saints, not devils, but human beings bound to the earth, listening to its secrets, and walking the perilous line between salvation and damnation. And as we move on, deeper into this medieval night, we will see how the ointments and salves they crafted did more than heal. For some, they became doors of escape, illusions of freedom for women trapped in lives of servitude, visions of flight that carried them, if only in dream, far beyond the walls that confined them. Come, let us follow the whispers of wings that never beat the air, but were felt all the same. The path leads us away from the healer's cottage, its rafters heavy with drying herbs, its shadows still thick with the scent of belladonna and smoke. The door shuts behind her, and we return to the night. The air is cool, the stars indifferent above, and yet something stirs in the imagination, the thought of what it might feel like to rise from this earth, to slip the tether of labor, hunger, and grief, if only for an hour. For the women of medieval Europe, whose days were bound in unending service, to husbands, to children, to the soil itself, the promise of flight was not only sorcery. It was longing. The ointments and salves crafted from henbane, mandrake, and nightshade were not just tools of healing. They were doors. Doors that opened onto landscapes of vision, where bodies grew light, where the soul wandered free of the body's burden, where, for once, they belonged only to themselves. Imagine her life by daylight. She rises at dawn in a smoke-filled hut, her body aching from the straw pallet, her hands already raw from the work to come. Bread must be kneaded from coarse grain, children clothed, water hauled, animals fed, fields tended. There is no privacy, no pause. Her body is not her own. It is demanded by labor, by childbirth, by hunger. To live is to endure. But by night, when the world grows silent, she reaches for the salve hidden in a clay pot beneath the hearth. She smears it on her temples, her thighs, her breasts. At first it is only warmth, then heaviness, then release. Her limbs sink into stillness, but her mind soars. She feels herself lifted, carried beyond the thatch and timber, into the open night sky. Below her, the fields stretch wide, the forests loom, the rivers gleam like threads of silver. She flies, not with wings, but with a soul unbound. For a few hours she is free. Such visions were condemned by the Church as illusions planted by the devil. And perhaps they were illusions. Yet to those who lived them, they were as real as the mud underfoot, as the pain in their backs, as the endless cries of infants in the dark. In the mind's flight, they found respite. In the soaring, they reclaimed something denied them in waking life: control, desire, freedom. Stories spread of gatherings beneath the moon, of women meeting in secret groves, feasting, dancing, joining hands in circles that spun until the stars themselves blurred. Some claimed they saw demons there, others saints, others still only their neighbors laughing, young again, unburdened. Were these real meetings? Or the shared echoes of dreams shaped by the same herbs, the same longings? We cannot say. But the visions were powerful enough to survive in rumor, in trial records, in the fearful sermons of priests. And not only women. Men, too, found escape in such illusions. Soldiers weary of blood and mud drank potions laced with herbs before battle, believing themselves invincible, their souls armored against fear. Peasants, drunk on ergot-tainted bread, danced wildly in the streets, their movements frenzied, their laughter spilling into screams. The body betrayed them, but in the frenzy, there was a strange kind of liberation. A moment when pain and hunger fell away, replaced by something larger, darker, but free. Think of the widow in her lonely hut. By day, she is pitted or scorned, her hands chapped from labor, her future bleak. But one night she anoints herself with salve and dreams of feasting at a long table, candles blazing, food endless, her belly warm and full. She wakes in the same cold hut, her stomach empty, and yet, for those hours, she was satisfied. She was rich. Illusion became a mercy. Or the young girl, promised in marriage to a man thrice her age. She weeps in secret, dreading the life that awaits her. But in her dreams, shaped by herbs slipped to her by a sympathetic aunt, she runs barefoot through meadows, she meets a lover of her own choosing, she laughs without fear. Perhaps it is only dream. Yet the dream gives her courage to endure the waking day. The Church thundered against such visions, branding them deceptions of Satan. Priests warned that the ointments of witches led not to freedom but to damnation, that the flights were not of the soul but of demons carrying women to unholy rites. And yet, beneath the condemnation lay an unspoken truth, that the desire for escape was too human to silence. Do you feel it? The hunger not just for bread, but for release. For a world where pain is eased, where labor is forgotten, where the soul is allowed to soar. Illusions of freedom, yes, but in a life bound by suffering, even illusion was a treasure. And so we see the strange double life of these herbs. By day, they healed, eased childbirth, soothed fever. By night, they carried souls into visions of freedom. Poison and cure, bondage and release, salvation and sin, all bound in a single leaf, a single root. Step now with me beyond the village. The road opens onto a fairground, lit by torches, filled with music and laughter. Here, too, illusions flourish. Wine flows, spiced with herbs that warm the blood. Dancers whirl in the firelight, their faces flushed, their bodies unwearied. Bread baked from rye carries the hidden poison of ergot, and soon whole crowds sway in frenzy, their minds aflame with visions. Some call it celebration, some call it madness, but all who join feel, for a time, lifted beyond themselves. Freedom, even if fleeting, even if born of poison. The bell tolls again, distant but insistent. Midnight fades, and the fairground's frenzy drifts into silence. The torches gutter. The dancers collapse in exhaustion. The road ahead darkens. And so we walk on, carrying with us the memory of these illusions. A mother dreaming of flight, a soldier drunk on fearlessness, a peasant dancing in a frenzy not his own. Each of them touched, however briefly, by the possibility of being more than their suffering allowed. Ahead, the sound changes. The laughter fades, replaced by a roar of voices, of weapons clashing, of songs sung too loud. For now, the night draws us toward the warriors, men who drank their own poisons before battle, seeking not visions of peace, but the illusion of courage. Come. Let us see what it means to fight beneath the haze of herbs and wine, to become, if only for a moment, drunken warriors. The fairground grows silent behind us, its laughter burned out like dying embers. The fields lie still once more, the torches cold, the air heavy with the mingled scents of trampled grass, spilled wine, and smoke. Yet listen closely, and you will hear another rhythm beating through the night, the clash of iron, the stamping of boots, the guttural chorus of voices raised in song and challenge. Follow that sound, and you come upon a camp of warriors. A circle of fires burns against the darkness, their flames licking high, sparks scattering into the sky like stars torn loose. Around them, men hunch over cups of wine, skins of ale, bowls of bitter brews. Laughter rises in jagged bursts. Boasts rattle the air like drumbeats. The scent here is sharp and heady, sweat, smoke, alcohol, the sour tang of herbs steeped too long. These are men who know that dawn will bring blood. Their weapons lean against logs and saddles, edges gleaming faintly in the firelight. Their armor lies at their feet, dented and stained, waiting to be buckled on. Tonight they drink not for pleasure, but for transformation. Imagine one of them, a young man, barely more than a boy, his face shadowed by the fire. Fear coils in his gut, though he would never confess it aloud. Tomorrow, he must stand in a line of shields, hear the thunder of hooves, feel the shock of steel on flesh. So tonight he grips a cup of wine laced with mandrake root, thick and bitter. He drinks deeply, and already the world begins to tilt. The firelight wavers, the fear recedes, and in its place blooms a heady, reckless courage. His heart pounds, his voice rises in song, and he believes, truly believes, that no blade can touch him, no spear can pierce him. This is the illusion these warriors seek. Fearlessness bought in a cup. But illusions, like poisons, have sharp edges. For though the draught may make him bold, it may also make him clumsy, erratic, a danger to friend as well as foe. Tomorrow's battle will not be the clean clash of heroic tales, but a chaos of half-drunken men, some fearless, some frenzied, some collapsing before a single blow. And yet the ritual persists, because the alternative, to march into battle sober, trembling, fully aware, is unthinkable. Better to gamble on herbs and wine, better to blur the edge of terror, better to stumble headlong into chaos than to face fear with clear eyes. Step closer to the fire. An older warrior lifts his horn, foam spilling down his beard. His eyes gleam wild in the flames. He tells a tale, how once, before a great raid, he drank a brew of mushrooms gathered from the forest floor. They made me a wolf, he growls, teeth bared. The enemy's cries were like music, their blood like wine. I felt nothing, feared nothing, until dawn broke and I stood alone among the dead. The others cheer, slamming their cups against the earth. They do not ask how many of his companions fell by his hand in that frenzy. They do not want to know. For this, too, is part of the warrior's world, the blur between courage and madness, between strength and destruction. The Norse spoke of berserkers, men who bit their shields and roared like beasts, their eyes bloodshot, their limbs thrashing as if possessed. Some say they ate mushrooms before battle, their visions stoking their fury. Others claim they drank strong brews of ale and herbs. Whatever the truth, the image spread, men unchained, half human, half animal, striking terror as much by their frenzy as by their blades. And in medieval Europe, echoes of such figures persisted. Chronicles tell of soldiers drinking wine steeped with opium before sieges, stumbling forward in stupor, indifferent to arrows that pierced their flesh. Others speak of mercenaries who chewed henbane before battle, their minds swimming, their voices rising in eerie chants. To their enemies, they seemed possessed. To their comrades, they were both weapon and threat. Look around this camp, and you will see the rituals that bind them. The youngest are goaded into drinking more, their hesitation mocked until they stagger with the rest. Songs are sung, bawdy and violent, their rhythms pounding like war drums. Some carve runes into the ground beside the fire, others fling herbs into the flames, watching the smoke twist upward as if carrying their courage to the gods. Every man plays his part, for in the ritual, fear is dissolved, or at least hidden. Yet beneath the noise, imagine the silence that follows. When the songs fade, when the cups are drained, when the fire burns low, the men lie on the ground, staring into the darkness. Some sleep, dead to the world. Others toss, haunted by visions born of too much drink, too many herbs. The night stretches long, and in the stillness, the illusion falters. Tomorrow waits with all its iron certainty. Do you see the irony? These warriors, celebrated for their strength, sought courage not in their hearts but in their cups. Their ferocity was borrowed, their bravery brewed. And yet it was enough. Enough to carry them forward, enough to make them believe, for a few hours, that they were invincible. As dawn approaches, the camp stirs. The air reeks of stale drink and sweat, of vomit and smoke. Armor is strapped on, weapons hefted, helmets pulled low. The men's eyes are bloodshot, their hands trembling, but their voices rise in ragged song. The illusion still clings, like smoke after fire. They march, unsteady but loud, and the ground shakes beneath their boots. The sun rises, red and pitiless. Ahead waits the enemy, their own fires cold, their own songs spent. The two lines crash together in a roar of steel and flesh. The young warrior we saw by the fire charges forward, wild-eyed, his blade swinging. He does not feel the spear that pierces his side. He does not hear the cries of his comrades. For in his mind, he is still soaring, still fearless, still drunk on the poison of courage. By nightfall, the field is quiet again. The illusion is gone, shattered by death, by pain, by silence. But in another camp, on another night, the fires will burn again, the cups will be lifted, the herbs mixed into wine, and the ritual will begin anew. This is the cycle of drunken warriors. Courage brewed in firelight, spent in chaos, remembered in song. A cycle as old as battle itself, as enduring as fear. Step away now, from the battlefield, from the blood and smoke. The night closes around us once more, muffling the cries of the dying. Ahead lies not war but festival, not the frenzy of warriors but the ecstasy of whole communities. For if men sought freedom in cups and herbs, so too did peasants in their own way, in weddings, fairs, and holy days that slipped into collective trance. Come. Let us walk toward the music that rises not from war camps, but from village squares, where bread and wine, laughter and madness weave whole crowds into ecstatic visions. The clash of iron fades behind us, its echoes swallowed by the night. The smoke of burning camps, of blood and sweat drifts away on the wind. For a time, there is only silence, the kind that comes after too much death, heavy and absolute. But as we walk further, listen, another sound begins to weave into the air. Not the roar of battle, but the lilting strain of pipes and fiddles, the deep pulse of drums, the rise of voices lifted not in war cries, but in song. We follow it down crooked lanes, through fields scattered with the remnants of harvest, until the road widens into a village square. Here, the world is alive again. Torches blaze in high iron baskets. Ale foams in wooden mugs. Couples whirl in rough dances, skirts spinning, boots stamping. The air is thick with wood smoke, roasting meat, and the sour sweet tang of cheap wine. It is a wedding, or perhaps a fair, or simply the feast day of some saint whose name no one remembers clearly after the third cup. What matters is the release, the chance, however brief, to forget hunger, plague, and toil. For one night, life belongs not to duty or pain, but to rhythm, laughter, and frenzy. The villagers drink deeply, but drink is not the only fuel. Bread passes from hand to hand, its crust blackened, its taste oddly sharp. Rye, grown in damp fields, often hides a secret, ergot, a fungus that clings to the grain, invisible until its poison unfurls in the body. The people eat, laugh, dance, and soon, their movements take on a wild edge. Feet pound harder, arms fling wider, voices rise to shouts. The fiddler plays faster, the drummers pound as though possessed, and the dancers cannot stop. One woman throws back her head, hair whipping, eyes wide and unseeing. A man beside her stumbles, then begins to spin, arms flailing. Children dart through the crowd, shrieking with laughter that turns to sobs. The air grows fevered, thick, unreal. The torches seem too bright, the music too loud, the world itself vibrating with strange energy. And still they dance. To us, it looks like madness. To them, it feels like release, perhaps even holiness. For centuries, outbreaks of such communal trances swept through Europe. The people called it choreomania, the dancing sickness. Entire villages seized by the same compulsion, men and women dancing for days without pause, until their feet bled, until they collapsed in exhaustion. Some claimed to see visions while they danced, angels beckoning, demons shrieking, saints weeping. Others spoke of unbearable heat flooding their bodies, relieved only by motion. Imagine the square at dawn, the sun rising on a crowd that has not stopped moving. Faces streaked with sweat and tears, mouths open in gasps, limbs trembling, yet the music does not falter, and neither do they. Onlookers join in, unable to resist, until the entire village reels in one great, shuddering rhythm. Was it poison in the bread, hysteria in the mind, or something darker? No one could say. The church sent priests to pray over the afflicted, sometimes joining their dances in hopes of breaking the curse. Physicians prescribed cool baths, or bloodletting, or music played at slower tempos to calm the frenzy. But the truth remained, for those caught in it, the trance was stronger than reason, stronger than will. And yet, within that madness was freedom. Think of lives bounded by endless work, by hunger gnawing through every winter, by fear of plague, war, and sin. Then think of the ecstasy of the trance, the release of every restraint, the body moving until it no longer felt like flesh at all, but spirit, fire, air. In those hours, the villagers belonged not to their lords, nor their priests, nor even their own fears. They belonged only to the rhythm. Not every trance came from ergot-tainted bread. Festivals themselves were engines of ecstasy. At midsummer, flames blazed high, and villagers leapt through the smoke, whirling until dizziness took them. At harvest, barrels of ale flowed freely, and songs rose until voices broke, bodies collapsing in heaps of laughter and sweat. Weddings became bacchanals, where entire communities join the dance, the drink, the delirium. Picture a bride and groom at the center of the square, crowned with garlands of flowers. Around them, their kin and neighbors dance in widening circles. The music rises, and soon the boundaries between individuals blur. Arms link, voices merge, and the crowd becomes a single organism, pulsing with energy. The bride's feet barely touch the ground. The groom's face glows with something like terror, something like joy. For this one night, they are swept into a current larger than themselves, the trance of the collective. And not only in villages. In towns and cities, guilds held feasts where apprentices and masters alike drank themselves into oblivion, stumbling into streets, singing until dawn. Pilgrimage sites became carnivals, where holy relics mingled with drunken revelry, and the line between devotion and delirium blurred. Even the great cathedrals were not immune. On certain feast days, the so-called Feast of Fools, priests donned masks, drank to excess, and danced before the altar, their voices echoing in vaulted stone. To the pious, it was scandal. To the participants, it was joy, perhaps even salvation through laughter. The body in trance was a paradox. To outside eyes, it was foolishness, even possession. But to those inside, it was a glimpse of freedom, a moment when the chains of the world loosened. And for some, that glimpse was enough to believe they had touched the divine. Step back into the village square with me. The music surges again. The dancers whirl, their shadows flickering on the timbered walls, their cries rising into the night. The torches blaze, the bread and ale vanish, and still the frenzy grows. A child collapses, eyes rolling back, limbs jerking in spasms. His mother screams, but moments later she too is caught in the dance, her arms flung wide, her mouth open in a wordless cry. The square is no longer a gathering. It is a storm. A storm of bodies, of voices, of souls unmoored. Tomorrow they will wake aching, bruised, perhaps ashamed. Some will not wake at all. But tonight they are free. Do you see the thread that ties them to the monks in their cloisters, to the healers in their huts, to the warriors in their camps? Each sought the same escape, the same loosening of the bonds that held them. Whether through smoke, salves, wine, or frenzy, they longed to step beyond the weight of their lives, if only for a moment. The music fades. The torches burn low. One by one, the dancers collapse, strewn across the square like petals after a storm. The night exhales, and silence seeps back in. But the memory lingers. And sometimes, memory becomes prophecy. For in the centuries to come, these trances will return, greater, stranger, more terrifying. Entire towns will be seized by dance, unable to stop, their bodies writhing until death claims them. The chronicles will call it plague, possession, punishment. We will know it as hysteria, ergot, frenzy. But to those who lived it, it was as real as the ground beneath their feet, as unstoppable as the tide. Come. Let us walk toward those darker outbreaks, those nights when the dance spread like fire through whole regions, when laughter curdled into terror, and freedom into doom. For ahead lies one of the strangest, most unsettling afflictions of the Middle Ages, the dancing plagues. The village square lies still now, littered with overturned cups, burnt-out torches, and the hushed weight of exhausted bodies. The frenzy has ebbed, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the faint creak of timbers settling in the night. For a moment, it feels as though the world itself is resting. But listen closely, beneath the silence, a deeper rhythm stirs. Not the music of a fiddler or the stamping of boots, but a pulse that once seized whole cities, dragging them into a madness of dance that no one could stop. We step forward into memory, into chronicle, into plague. It begins quietly, almost innocently. A single woman in Strasbourg, the summer of 1518. Her name is lost to history, some say Frau Trophia, but her body tells the tale. She steps into the street one morning and begins to dance. There is no music, no celebration. Her feet beat against the cobblestones in a strange, relentless rhythm. Hours pass. Neighbors gather. Still she dances, her face twisted in exhaustion, her limbs trembling, yet unable to stop. Days pass. She collapses, sleeps, rises, and begins again. Soon others join her. First a handful, then dozens. Men and women, seized by the same compulsion, moving as if pulled by invisible strings. The streets fill with their bodies, writhing, leaping, stamping, their cries rising into the hot summer air. Onlookers watch in horror, in fascination. Priests whisper of possession. Physicians speak of overheated blood. The city council, desperate, hires musicians to play, believing that music might exhaust the dancers and cure them. Instead, the frenzy deepens. The viols and drums echo through the streets, and hundreds more are swept into the storm. By the height of the outbreak, nearly 400 people dance through Strasbourg's squares, day and night, their feet bleeding, their bodies wasting. Some collapse in seizures. Some die of exhaustion, heart failure, stroke. But the dance continues, unstoppable, contagious as fire. And Strasbourg was not the first. In 1374, the city of Aachen witnessed the same madness. Crowds of men and women filled the streets, whirling, shouting, their visions spilling into delirium. Chroniclers wrote that the dancers saw saints and demons at their shoulders, that they cried out for mercy, that they clutched their heads as if possessed by invisible hands. From Aachen, the plague spread along the Rhine, from town to town, leaving trails of frenzy in its wake. Imagine it, entire streets filled with bodies moving without rest, families dragging loved ones from the press only to see them stagger back into the crowd, compelled to dance until their strength gave out. To live in such a place was to wake each day wondering if you too would feel the rhythm seize you, if your body would betray you before your mind. What caused it? We, with our modern eyes, search for answers. Ergot, the fungus that laces rye with toxins, twisting the nerves, sparking hallucinations, convulsions. It is a tempting explanation. The bread was eaten daily, its poison invisible. A single harvest spoiled could seed an entire village's frenzy. And yet, ergot alone does not explain the strange compulsion, the visions, the persistence of the dance. Others speak of mass hysteria, born of hunger, plague, and fear. The Middle Ages were fertile ground for despair. Famine swept through fields, plague through streets, war through kingdoms. To live was to suffer, to fear, to kneel in endless prayer. Perhaps the dancing was a release too powerful to resist, the mind breaking its chains in the only way it could, by surrendering the body to movement, to frenzy, to trance. To the people themselves, the cause was clear, it was divine punishment. Saint Vitus, they said, had cursed them, striking sinners with a madness of motion until they repented. Families dragged afflicted dancers to chapels dedicated to the saint, laying them before relics, praying for release. Pilgrimages were made, offerings left, masses said. Sometimes the dancers calmed in those holy places, their bodies finally sinking into stillness. Other times, even the relics failed, and the dance carried on. Step into one of those chapels with me. The air is thick with incense, the walls lined with flickering candles. At the altar lies the relic of Saint Vitus, a bone or a fragment of cloth. Before it, a man writhes, his feet stamping, his arms flailing, his cries echoing off the stone. His family kneels beside him, weeping, begging the saint for mercy. The priest chants, the incense curls, the crowd holds its breath. Will the plague end here, in miracle? Or will the madness mock even the saints? The answer is never certain. For the dancing plagues were not bound to one place, one year, one cause. They erupted again and again, in Strasbourg, in Aachen, in Basel, in dozens of towns along the Rhine and beyond. Each time, they baffled physicians, terrified priests, fascinated chroniclers. Each time, they left behind the same questions, unanswered, unanswerable. But to those who lived them, the questions mattered less than the experience. To dance until collapse was not a puzzle but a reality. one felt in flesh and bone. Some described visions, bright lights, holy figures, demons clawing at their limbs. Others spoke of unbearable pressure inside their bodies, relieved only by movement. Still others said nothing at all, their faces locked in grimaces of exhaustion, their feet moving until death stilled them. Do you feel the unease of it? To walk through your town square and see not joy, not festival, but hundreds of your neighbors trapped in endless motion, as if the ground itself had learned to convulse. To hear music that will not stop, to see eyes that do not recognize you, to know that tomorrow it might be your turn. It was spectacle, yes, but also terror. And it left its mark on memory, lingering long after the dancers had fallen silent. In some places, chapels to St. Vitus were built, their walls covered with images of dancers, half joyful, half tormented. In others, processions were held each year to ward off the return of the plague, drums beating, feet marching, echoes of the frenzy, tamed into ritual. The dancing plagues remind us of the thin line between devotion and delirium, between joy and madness. They show us how tightly wound the human spirit was in those centuries, how a single spark, a woman stepping into the street, a loaf of tainted bread, a whisper of divine curse, could ignite whole communities into frenzy. And when the frenzy ended, it ended suddenly. As mysteriously as it began, the plague burned itself out. The dancers collapsed, the music stopped, the streets emptied. Silence returned, heavy, uneasy. Families buried their dead, priests gave thanks, physicians wrote their confused notes. But none forgot. And in whispers, in stories, in sermons, the fear remained that the dance could return at any moment. Step now out of Strasbourg, out of Aachen, out of the chapels and squares. The night closes around us once more, the air heavy with memory. We have seen visions in cloisters, flights in ointments, courage in cups, frenzy in festivals. But now, the path draws us toward another kind of vision, one born not of crowds, but of solitude. In quiet laboratories, behind shuttered windows, men in robes bent over alembics and crucibles, seeking not frenzy but eternity. Come. Let us walk into the chambers of the alchemists, where elixirs of life and death simmered side by side, and smoke once again became a key to secrets beyond the ordinary world. The square of Strasbourg empties in our memory, its frenzy stilled, its cobblestones slick with sweat and silence. We walk on, leaving behind the haunted echoes of dancing feet. Ahead, the night grows quieter yet stranger. For out of the hush rises another sound, the hiss of steam, the bubbling of liquids, the faint metallic clatter of flasks and crucibles. Somewhere close, a furnace glows, and smoke curls from a chimney that ought to be dark at this hour. Step closer, and you find a shuttered chamber, its windows sealed against prying eyes. Inside, the air is thick with odors unfamiliar and unsettling, resin, sulfur, alcohol, herbs smoldering in hidden braziers. Candles drip wax onto cluttered tables. Glass vessels squat in racks, their necks thin and fragile, their bellies fat with strange liquids that shimmer in the candlelight. Here, in this hidden laboratory, works the alchemist. He is not priest, though he prays. He is not physician, though he mixes remedies. He is not sorcerer, though the world calls him one. He stands apart, straddling the boundaries between science and magic, faith and folly. His robe is stained, his beard singed, his eyes alight with hunger, not for food or wine, but for the secret of transformation. What does he seek? Gold, some say, the transmutation of base metals into the perfect, eternal metal, incorruptible as the sun. But others whisper that gold is only a symbol, a step toward the true goal, the elixir of life. A liquid that can heal every sickness, prolong existence, even grant immortality. Imagine the temptation in a world where death walks so near, where plague sweeps whole towns into graves, where children die before they can speak. To hold in one's hand a vial of liquid that promises eternity, what greater dream could there be? And so the alchemist toils. He grinds minerals into dust, stirs resins into alcohol, dissolves metals into acids, and burns herbs until their smoke curls upward like prayers. He believes that through fire, water, air, and earth, through endless cycles of distillation and refinement, the impure may become pure, the corrupt incorruptible, the mortal immortal. Look closer at his table. A flask bubbles with a dark red tincture, heavy with opium dissolved in wine. Another glows faintly gold, its surface rippling like oil, brewed from resin, honey, and crushed herbs. He tastes cautiously, recording each effect in crabbed Latin script. One mixture dulls pain but clouds the mind with visions. Another stirs energy but leaves the heart racing like a hunted stag. He tests on himself, on servants, sometimes on desperate peasants who come begging for cures. Some leave grateful, their fever eased. Others do not leave at all. To the Church, such work reeks of heresy. Knowledge should flow through sanctioned channels, the writings of Galen, the authority of Scripture, the words of physicians trained in universities. Yet the alchemist works outside these bounds, guided by texts half mystical, half scientific, Arabic treatises smuggled through Spain, Hermetic writings said to descend from Egypt, grimoires filled with symbols and riddles. His laboratory is both chapel and kitchen, both workshop and temple. The crucible is his altar, the flame his confessor, the elixir his sacrament. And yet not all is deception. In their restless pursuit, alchemists stumbled upon discoveries that would shape centuries to come. They learned to distill alcohol to purity, creating spirits that burned clear and strong. They identified acids, aqua fortis, aqua regia, powerful enough to dissolve metals. They created tinctures, syrups, and resins that soothed or stupefied, preserved or poisoned. Their quest for immortality may have failed, but their fumbling hands opened doors to chemistry, to medicine, to pharmacy. Imagine the scene when one of their elixirs takes effect. A wealthy patron, pale with fever, drinks a draught brewed of wine, opium, and resin. At first his body slackens, his pain loosens its grip. His eyes glaze, his breath slows. For a few blessed hours he feels whole again, as though disease has lifted. He blesses the alchemist, calling him savior, prophet, miracle worker. Yet the relief is temporary, the danger immense. Too little, and the elixir soothes without healing. Too much, and the patron sleeps into death, slipping away with lips still wet from the cup. Still the work continues. Because in a world plagued by suffering, even the promise of relief is enough. And because the alchemist himself is as much prisoner as master. He is haunted by visions of perfection, by symbols drawn in ancient texts, by whispers that just one more refinement, one more cycle, one more mixture will yield the answer. He cannot stop, because he believes that somewhere in the crucible lies not only gold, but salvation. Step now into his mind if you dare. He dreams of fire that does not burn, of water that heals every wound, of stone that glows with eternal light. He dreams of angels guiding his hand, of demons mocking his failures, of a hidden world layered beneath this one where secrets wait to be revealed. To him, the work is not madness but devotion. And in the glow of his furnace, in the smoke of his herbs, in the shimmer of his elixirs, who is to say where madness ends and revelation begins? Others see him differently. To neighbors, he is dangerous, meddling with powers best left alone. To nobles, he is useful, so long as his mixtures ease pain or promise wealth. To the Church, he is suspect, his smoke rising not as prayer but as challenge. To himself, he is a pilgrim on the longest road, walking not toward a shrine but toward the perfection of all things. Do you smell the resin? Do you hear the bubbling of the flasks, the hiss of flame? This is the music of his world, quieter than the dance, more secret than the fair, but no less charged with longing. Here too lies the medieval hunger for escape, not through flight or frenzy, but through mastery, through the hope that in smoke and liquid, eternity might be distilled. The hour grows late. The alchemist bends over his furnace, sweat dripping, hands trembling as he pours a golden tincture into a vial. He lifts it to the candlelight. It glows faintly, like captured sunlight. His breath catches. Is this it? Has he finally found the elixir of life? Or is it only another illusion, another sip of poison dressed as salvation? We will never know, for his story is swallowed in secrecy. What remains are whispers, fragments, recipes half-scrawled, legends of elixirs that healed or killed, myths of immortality just beyond reach. Step away now, leaving his shuttered chamber, the smoke curling out into the cold night. The streets are quiet, but another kind of smoke drifts nearby, not from hidden furnaces, but from open censers swinging before altars, from churches heavy with incense where visions rose with the prayers of the faithful. Come, let us walk toward the great cathedrals, where the air itself became a drug, and where the church wrapped its mysteries in clouds of sacred smoke. The shutters of the alchemist's room close behind us, sealing away his furnaces, his bubbling flasks, his dreams of immortality. The night opens wide again, cool and still, but before long another smoke draws us onward. It does not sting like resin in a crucible. It is sweeter, heavier, lingering in the air like perfume. Follow it, and soon stone towers rise against the sky, their spires pricking the clouds. Bells toll in the distance, solemn and deep, and light spills from tall, arched windows. We enter a cathedral. At once the world changes. The square outside was dark, the streets narrow and mean, but here the space soars. Columns rise like trees, vaulting high into shadow. Candles flicker in their thousands, their flames multiplied in golden mosaics, in polished chalices, in the gilt of painted saints. The air is thick, almost tangible, with incense. It coils from swinging censers, clouds billowing with each slow arc. Frankincense, myrrh, storax, sometimes local herbs like sage and juniper mixed in, each chosen not only for fragrance but for meaning. Sweetness for devotion. Sharpness for purification. Smoke to carry prayers upward, visible as breath itself. Breathe it in, and you feel it instantly. The chest grows heavy, the head light. The world beyond the haze blurs at the edges. The choir sings, their voices rising in waves that seem to shimmer with the smoke, until sound and scent and sight merge into a single overwhelming tide. This is no accident. The church understood well the power of smoke. Incense was prayer made tangible, yes, but it was also theater, alchemy, even medicine. In small chapels it masked the stench of unwashed pilgrims and the faint reek of decay from bodies buried in crypts below. In great cathedrals, it softened the air, bent minds toward reverence, lulled worshippers into states where visions seemed possible. Imagine a peasant kneeling in the nave, exhausted from fields, burdened by hunger, his life a constant grind of labor and fear. The incense fills his lungs, the chant wraps around him, the light from stained glass scatters like jewels across his bent head. For a moment, he feels himself lifted. The pain in his back fades. His thoughts blur. Perhaps he sees the Virgin smiling down at him, or an angel's wings unfolding in the haze. Perhaps he weeps, believing it a miracle. To him, it is. Priests themselves were not immune. Records tell of men fainting at the altar, overcome by the heavy smoke of feast days when censers swung without pause. Some spoke afterward of visions, of Christ bleeding from the crucifix, of saints stepping down from their niches. Others called it weakness, mere dizziness. But in a world where the spiritual and the physical intertwined without boundary, who could say? Was it faintness, or revelation? Smoke blurred the line. Consider also the rituals of exorcism, where incense was a weapon. Priests thrust censers before the afflicted, the fumes billowing into their faces. Demons, it was said, could not endure the sacred smoke. The writhing, coughing, choking of the possessed was proof enough to those who watched. The incense cleansed, banished, purified. And if the victim collapsed into silence, it was triumph. Not only incense, but herbs too found their place in holy ritual. At Easter, churches burned bay and laurel, symbols of victory over death. On feast days, they scattered rosemary and thyme, filling the nave with sharp green scents. At funerals, juniper and pine smoldered, masking the sweetness of decay. Each fragrance spoke its own language, carried its own meaning. Worship was not only sight and sound, but smell, taste, and breath. But there was danger in the haze as well. Too much incense clouded the mind. Some whispered that visions granted in smoke were not always divine. Could the devil not creep in through the same door, twisting dreams into delusions? The church trod a careful line, balancing ecstasy with order, revelation with control. Do you hear the chants? Low, resonant, filling the air until words dissolve into pure vibration. Do you see the smoke curling upward, forming shapes that dance in the candlelight? A child might swear it looks like angels. An old woman might insist she sees the souls of the dead rising. A monk, fasting and sleepless, might fall to the floor in ecstasy, his body racked with visions. For hours, perhaps days afterward, he will record what he saw: flaming wheels, trumpeting hosts, the face of God itself. Scholars may argue whether it was incense or inspiration. But to him, it was truth. The Church, for all its suspicion of unregulated visions, knew how useful such experiences could be. A parishioner who left Mass convinced he had glimpsed the divine became more obedient, more devout. Stories of miracles spread, drawing pilgrims, filling coffers. Smoke was not only prayer. It was persuasion, power. Yet step outside, and you would hear other voices. The healer's herbs, the witch's salves, they too used smoke, though theirs was branded profane. What was incense in a golden censer became sorcery when burned in a clay bowl. What was prayer in a cathedral became witchcraft in a hut. The difference lay not in the herb, but in the hand that burned it. Inside the cathedral, the smoke swells thicker. The priest lifts the censer high, swinging it in slow arcs. Ash scatters. Sparks leap. The crowd bows their heads, their vision obscured, their senses overwhelmed. They breathe together, kneel together, dream together. The cathedral becomes a single body, inhaling, exhaling, caught in a trance sanctified by ritual. This is how the Church held its flock, not only with doctrine and threat, but with sensation, with atmosphere, with smoke that softened reality and ushered worshippers into another world. For an hour they lived not in mud and hunger, but in a kingdom of light and fragrance, where angels walked and eternity seemed near. And when they left, the memory clung to them, like the smell of incense in their hair and clothes. It lingered in their lungs, their thoughts, their prayers. It reminded them that there was more than toil and fear, that heaven itself was only a breath away. Step back now from the nave, from the glow of candles and the press of smoke. The doors swing wide, the cool night rushes in. Behind us, the chants echo faintly. Ahead, the streets are dark once more. But even here, in the shadowy alleys and forests, smoke rises, not from sanctified censers, but from hidden fires where other groups gather, chanting their own songs, mixing their own potions, creating visions the Church would call heresy. Come, let us follow those secret trails, into the midnight gatherings of sects that met in defiance, drinking and dreaming in smoke-filled rooms. There we will find the heretics, the wanderers, the outcasts, and the visions that terrified the Church most of all. The bells still toll faintly behind us, muffled by distance, by stone, by the veil of night. The incense clings faintly to our clothes, sweet and heavy. But as we leave the broad square of the cathedral, the streets grow narrower, the light dimmer. Here, behind shuttered windows and bolted doors, another kind of smoke drifts upward, not sanctioned, not sanctified, but secret. Follow the narrow alleys, and you will find them, gatherings held in barns, in cellars, in groves at the forest's edge. A single candle burns, its flame hidden from the road. A circle of men and women whisper prayers, but not the Latin prayers sanctioned by priests. Their words tumble in their own tongue, strange and fervent, rising with the smoke of herbs burned in clay bowls. The church would call them heretics. They call themselves seekers. Some are Cathars, remnants of a faith that the church hunted nearly to extinction in fire and sword. Others are brethren of the free spirit, men and women who believe that the soul is already divine, free of sin, free of hierarchy, free of priests. Still others are nameless, local, a handful of villagers who have woven fragments of scripture with fragments of old belief, creating rituals half Christian, half pagan, wholly their own. Imagine the fear that drives them underground. The Inquisition is no rumor here. Already neighbors have been questioned, dragged into courts, forced to name names. Already, whispers have led to torches, to pyres built in marketplaces. To be found among such a circle is to risk death. And yet they gather, because what the church offers in incense and chant is not enough. They hunger for something more intimate, more immediate, more alive. The rituals vary, but certain threads repeat. Herbs crushed into wine, their bitterness masked by honey. Oils smeared on skin, thick with henbane or belladonna. A bowl of smoke rising, its fumes inhaled until the world softens, until vision blurs. Then the chanting begins, low at first, then rising, until voices tremble with something between ecstasy and fear. Men and women sway together, hands clasping, bodies pressing close. Sometimes the ritual turns ecstatic, erotic, boundary dissolved in the haze. The church will later describe these gatherings in lurid detail: naked dances, obscene rites, orgies offered to demons. And perhaps sometimes there was truth in such accusations, not because they served devils, but because they sought freedom from bonds, from shame, from the endless weight of sin. In the blur of smoke and trance, they tasted a world without rules, a freedom both terrifying and sweet. But not all visions are joyous. Some fall writhing to the floor, struck by convulsions. Some cry out that angels are speaking through them, their voices rising in strange tongues. Others whisper of terrible apparitions, beasts with burning eyes, shadows that coil in corners, figures that promise knowledge if only they will surrender. To those who gather, these are not delusions. They are revelations, proof that they have touched the veil, torn it aside, glimpsed the truth beyond. Do you feel the tension? The mix of fear and wonder, of danger and exaltation. A single knock at the door could bring the church's officers, chains, and fire. Yet the voices rise higher, the smoke thickens, the visions deepen. They believe that in these hidden nights, they come closer to God than ever they could in a cathedral. And when dawn breaks, they scatter, each to their own life. The barn is swept clean, the candle stub buried, the bowl of ashes cast into the wind. In the daylight, they return to their fields, their looms, their shops. To neighbors, they are ordinary men and women, bowed by the same labors as all. Only the faint glow in their eyes, the lingering memory of visions, marks them as different. The church feared them not only for heresy, but for power. For if men and women could find ecstasy, healing, even salvation outside the sacraments, what need had they of priests? If smoke and chant in a barn could rival incense, and choir in a cathedral, what authority remained? And so the sects were hunted, driven into deeper secrecy. Some faded into silence, leaving only whispers. Others burned, literally, their ashes scattered in town squares as warnings. But still the gatherings persisted, like embers beneath ash. For the hunger that drove them was too deep to extinguish. In a world where suffering was constant, where the church often offered fear more than comfort, people sought their own rituals of release, their own paths to visions, their own smoke-filled sanctuaries. Step now into one such meeting, a forest clearing lit by moonlight. A circle of figures chant softly, their voices rising with the crackle of a fire. Herbs burn in the flames, their fragrance sharp and intoxicating. One woman begins to speak, her words halting at first, then stronger, as though another voice is using her tongue. The others listen, wide-eyed, convinced she channels a saint, or perhaps God himself. They weep, they laugh, they embrace. For a few hours, they are free of fear, free of sin, free of death. Is it heresy? Is it madness? Or is it simply another form of the same longing we have seen everywhere, the longing for escape, for meaning, for a glimpse beyond the veil of toil and pain? When we leave the clearing, the smoke drifts upward, mingling with the stars. The sect fades back into shadow, its voice is swallowed by the night. But the echo remains, the memory of a faith lived in whispers, of visions born in secrecy, of courage paid for in risk. And just as the sects hid in barns and forests, so too did others live hidden at the edges of society, not as groups, but as individuals. Wanderers, beggars, prophets, madmen. Outcasts who survived on scraps and wild herbs, whose visions were both feared and revered. Come, let us leave the secret circles and follow the lonely roads, where the smoke is thinner, the fire smaller, but the visions perhaps more terrifying still. The clearing falls behind us, its smoke curling into the canopy, its voices swallowed by leaves. The forest path stretches ahead, narrow and uncertain, and along it move figures who belong neither to the village nor the cathedral, either to guild nor to sect. They are wanderers, shadows at the edge of the medieval world, surviving on little more than what the land offers and what others will spare. By day, you might glimpse them on the road, a hunched shape dragging a bundle, a cloaked figure leaning on a staff, a child tugging at a mother's ragged sleeve. They beg at crossroads, sleep beneath hedges, haunt the outskirts of towns where the air smells of dung and smoke. They are called vagrants, beggars, prophets, lunatics. They are pitied, feared, sometimes revered. Their survival depends on what nature and chance provide. Wild herbs gathered from ditches and forest edges, nettles, sorrel, dandelion, bitter roots that fill the belly when bread cannot be had. Mushrooms plucked from damp logs, some nourishing, some deadly. A handful of berries, a strip of bark boiled into bitter broth. The strong spirits of the peasantry might sicken, but these outcasts learn to eat what others shun, to drink what others spit out, to stretch hunger into visions. And visions come. For hunger itself is a drug, stripping the body of strength but sharpening the mind until dreams bleed into waking. Add to that the herbs they chew, the fermented dregs of ale gifted or stolen, the smoke of weeds burned in small fires, and the outcast walks a line between this world and another. Imagine one such wanderer, a man with hair matted, clothes torn, his eyes bright with a light that unsettles. He mutters to himself as he stumbles along the roadside. Children laugh and throw stones, but adults glance away uneasily, for they know the type. Such men sometimes speak prophecies. Sometimes they curse, and the curse comes true. Sometimes they drop dead in a ditch, and sometimes they wander on for years, their words remembered long after. One evening, a crowd gathers at the edge of a village. A woman has come from the forest, barefoot, her skin streaked with mud. She claims the Virgin spoke to her in a vision, that famine is coming, that sin festers in their parish. Some scoff. Others tremble. The priest denounces her as mad. But when rain fails weeks later, some whisper that perhaps she was right. Perhaps the outcast speaks with the voice of heaven. So it is with wanderers, despised yet half revered, rejected yet sought out. They are thresholds in flesh, half in the world of men, half in the realm of the divine, the uncanny, the feared. Not all are prophets. Many are simply broken souls, driven from homes by hunger, by plague, by shame. Lepers cast out from villages, their bodies rotting slowly, bells tied to their wrists so others hear them coming. Widows too poor to keep their houses, children orphaned by war. Their lives are a slow exile, a pilgrimage without destination. But even these, in their suffering, are seen through the lens of vision. To meet a leper is to glimpse divine punishment. To hear a mad beggar laugh at the moon is to feel that madness might be contagious. To see an orphan wander singing nonsense songs is to wonder if an angel, or a demon guides its tongue. The medieval world was crowded with symbols. Nothing stood alone. Everything pointed beyond itself. And so the outcast, who lived beyond society, became a walking omen. Step with me now into a wayside tavern. Inside, the air is thick with ale and smoke, laughter loud, fists slamming on tables. The door creaks open, and a wanderer slips in, a gaunt man, his cloak stiff with dirt. He raises a hand, asks for drink. The tavern erupts in jeers. A jug is tossed his way, filled with dregs thick and sour. He drinks deeply, his eyes rolling back, his body trembling. Then he begins to speak, his voice rising strange and high, words tumbling out in riddles. Fire from the east, he cries. Blood in the fields. Wolves at the gate. The laughter falters. Men shift uneasily. For riddles spoken in drunken frenzy sometimes prove true. Later, when raiders burn the next valley, the tavern men will remember. They will tell the tale of the outcast who warned them, half drunk, half divine. They will call him mad, but they will listen for echoes of his voice in the wind. It is this unease that marks the wanderer's place in medieval life. He is both nothing and something, useless and essential. The Church condemns him, calling vagrancy a sin, a rebellion against the order of labor and obedience. Lords despise him, for he owes no rent, no service. Villagers fear him, for he carries disease, bad luck, strange words. Yet he lingers at the edge of every fire, every feast, every market. For the world cannot rid itself of its outcasts. It needs them, as mirrors, as omens, as reminders of the thin line between order and chaos. Some of these wanderers embrace their role. They paint their faces with ash, cover themselves in rags, and proclaim themselves prophets. They wander from town to town, gathering small followings of the desperate, preaching the end of days, the coming of Christ, the cleansing fire. Some are beaten, others burned, but a few ignite movements that ripple through the land, frightening bishops and kings alike. For who listens to a ragged prophet? Only the poor, the hungry, the hopeless, and they are many. Picture such a figure at the gates of a city, his voice hoarse, his hands lifted high. Repent, he cries. The earth burns beneath your feet. Guards mock him, drive him off with kicks. But the poor gather, their eyes wide, their hearts aching for hope, for explanation, for meaning. In his madness, they find truth. In his poverty, they see purity. In his visions, they glimpse the possibility of justice. Thus the wanderer becomes both danger and salvation. He is the edge upon which society cuts itself, reminder of suffering, vessel of prophecy, bearer of visions that cannot be controlled. The night deepens. The road winds onward past hedges, past fields left fallow. Ahead, a small fire burns beside the ditch. A family of wanderers huddles there, their cloaks pulled tight, their faces hollow. They pass around a jug of thin ale, mixed with bitter herbs. The children sip, their eyelids heavy. The parents stare into the flames, seeing not fire but something beyond. Perhaps they dream of angels, perhaps only of bread. Tomorrow, they will move on. No one will remember them, save perhaps for a muttered word, a glimpse of their smoke in the night. The path narrows, and with it, the company thins. From secret sects to lonely wanderers, the thread of vision continues, fragile yet unbroken. Each sought escape, revelation, freedom, but at greater cost, at deeper risk. Ahead waits another scene darker still. For even infants were not spared the poisons and potions of this age. In cottages and manors alike, parents fed their children syrups laced with sleep, desperate for quiet, for peace, even at the price of death. Come, let us leave the wanderers to their road and step into the households of the Middle Ages, where cradles creaked, lullabies faded, and children slipped into dangerous dreams beneath the shadow of drowsy syrups. The road is empty now, save for the faint smell of smoke and the ghost of a song half heard in the night. The wanderers drift onward, nameless and forgotten. We turn instead toward the cottages clustered in the fields, their thatched roofs low, their shutters closed against the cold. Within these huts, the story grows smaller, closer, quieter, but no less haunting. For here, in the flicker of the hearth, in the shadows of the cradle, children were lulled not only with song but with potions that promised peace, and too often delivered silence. Step inside a peasant's home. The air is heavy with the smell of smoke and damp wool. A cradle stands near the fire, its frame rough-hewn, its bedding little more than straw and rags. A mother rocks it with one hand while kneading dough with the other, her movements weary, automatic. Her child cries, shrill and unrelenting, its wails piercing the thin walls. She sighs, glances toward a small flask tucked away on a shelf. It holds a syrup, dark, bitter, laced with poppy juice. She dips a rag, squeezes a few drops into the child's mouth. The cries falter, soften, fade. The infant sinks into sleep, its tiny chest rising slow and shallow. The mother exhales, relieved. For a time, the house is quiet. She returns to her work, her ears no longer ringing. Yet behind her relief lurks unease, for she knows too well the dangers. Some children never wake from such slumber. This was the reality of medieval life. Infants cried, as infants do. But in homes where work was endless, where every hand was needed, where exhaustion was constant, patience wore thin. Sleep was scarce for parents, and silence was precious. To soothe their children, they turned to what they knew: herbs, syrups, and draughts, recipes passed down through generations. Poppy was chief among them. The plant's milky sap, when boiled into syrups or steeped in wine, dulled pain and brought sleep. Physicians recommended it in measured doses. But measurement, in the rough hands of peasants, was guesswork. How much juice in the cup? How strong the poppy of one field versus another? A drop too many, and the syrup that soothed became the syrup that stilled forever. Nor was poppy alone. Mixtures sometimes included henbane or mandrake, their roots twisted into human shapes, their essences strong and strange. Belladonna, too, with its dark berries tempting and deadly, found its way into household remedies. A pinch quieted pain. A little more blurred sight, slowed breath, dimmed the world to black. And so, countless infants drifted into dangerous sleep. Some woke, weary and calm, their cries stilled for hours. Others did not wake, their small bodies still and cold by dawn. Mothers wept, fathers cursed, priests muttered of God's will. Yet the practice endured, for what choice was there? Better a quiet child, even at risk, than a house undone by endless wailing. The wealthy were no different. In manor houses, where nurses tended noble infants, syrups were prepared with finer ingredients, measured with silver spoons, recorded in neat scripts. But the danger remained. Even the most carefully brewed draught could slip from cure to poison. Chronicles whisper of noble heirs lost in their cradles, their deaths mourned as divine mystery but rooted in the same bitter drops. Consider the paradox. In an age when death hovered over every birth, when half of all children did not reach adulthood, parents reached for remedies that both preserved and endangered life. They loved their children fiercely, yet in their desperation for rest, they gave them sleep that might last forever. The Church condemned such practices, at least in theory. Priests warned against unnatural remedies, urging prayer, blessings, holy water instead. But even priests, weary of constant cries in their parishes, looked the other way. Some parish records even note the quiet deaths of infants without inquiry. God had taken them, it was said. And who could argue, when death in infancy was so common, so expected? And yet not all was despair. In some cases, the syrups worked as intended. A child restless with fever drank a draught, and woke hours later calmer, stronger, saved by the sleep that healed. Mothers passed recipes to daughters, nurses to apprentices. In these small successes lay hope, and the fragile thread of tradition that bound generations. Still, the shadow lingered. Imagine being that mother by the hearth, watching her infant's chest rise shallowly, fearing each moment might be the last. Imagine her relief when the child stirs, its eyes flutter open, its cry returns. Imagine her grief when it does not. In such moments, love and fear braided together, inseparable. Step with me into a cottage at midnight. The father snores on a straw bed, the mother sits awake, her child beside her in the cradle. She rocks slowly, humming a tune, her eyes fixed on the flask of syrup. She knows she should not, that too much is danger, that prayer might be safer. But her body aches, her eyes burn, the baby's cries cut like knives. At last she gives in. She tips the flask, moistens her finger, touches it to the child's lips. The cries fade, the night grows still. She lies back, relief flooding her. For now, the silence feels like mercy. By dawn, mercy may turn to mourning. This was life in the Middle Ages, a constant gamble between survival and risk, between comfort and danger. Parents did what they could, balancing exhaustion against love, hope against despair. The syrups they gave their children were both balm and blade. And as we leave this quiet cottage, the cradle creaking, the flask glinting in firelight, we carry with us the heavy knowledge that even in love, the line between healing and harm was perilously thin. The night air meets us again, cool and sharp. The road stretches onward, leading not to cradles but to chambers where beauty itself demanded poisons, where vanity led nobles to dab their eyes with drops that made them shine while blindness crept ever closer. Come, let us walk into those halls of silk and jewels, where noblewomen courted death in pursuit of beauty, and where belladonna, deadly nightshade, became both mirror and mask. The cottage lies behind us, its fire dimming, its lullaby unfinished. Outside, the night gathers again, cool and sharp. But as we walk further, the path broadens, the huts give way to stone houses, then to tall walls and towers. Lamps gleam in arched windows. Silk rustles behind shutters. Here, the air smells not of smoke and poppy, but of rose water, musk, and powders sifted through jeweled sieves. We have entered the world of nobility, where beauty was not only a gift but a weapon, and where the pursuit of loveliness often came with a bitter taste of poison. Step into a noblewoman's chamber. The walls are hung with tapestries, the floor scattered with rushes scented with lavender. On a carved table rests a mirror of polished metal, flanked by small glass vials and ivory boxes. By the flicker of candlelight, a lady leans close, her maid beside her, a vial in hand. The liquid inside is clear, shimmering faintly. It is belladonna, deadly nightshade. A single drop placed carefully into the eye will dilate the pupil, making it dark and wide. In a world where beauty meant mystery, where wide eyes were signs of allure, such drops were prized. She tilts her head back. The maid steadies her hand, lets fall the drop. At once her eyes gleam, dark and glassy, their depth unnatural, alluring. To those who gaze at her across the hall, she seems luminous, captivating. But beneath the shimmer lies danger. Belladonna blurs vision, clouds the mind, and with repeated use, blinds. Its poison creeps slowly, a shadow at the edges of sight, a trembling in the hand, a fever in the blood. Beauty gained, health lost. And yet, the vial is used again and again. For in courts where marriages were alliances, where appearance meant survival, the risk was borne willingly. Nor was belladonna the only poison of beauty. White lead, ground fine and mixed with vinegar, was spread across cheeks to pale the skin, for paleness was luxury, proof of leisure, of distance from fields and sun. But lead seeps through the skin, sinking into flesh, poisoning blood. It blackens teeth, loosens hair, hollows the face it was meant to perfect. Still, noblewomen layered it thick, their masks gleaming in candlelight, fragile as porcelain. Consider also the powders of arsenic, dusted lightly, or the washes made from mercury salts, meant to smooth blemishes, brighten complexion. They burned as they healed, scarred as they softened. To the user, the sting was proof of power. To us, it is the whisper of poison. Perfumes, too, carried risk. Distilled from herbs and resins, they masked the odors of sweat and sickness, but their bases were strong alcohols, oils, sometimes laced with narcotics. To wear them daily was to bathe in invisible danger, to inhale slow toxins with every breath. And yet, the pursuit of beauty was not vanity alone. It was survival. A woman's place in courtly life depended upon her appearance, as much as her wit or her dowry. Beauty secured favor, marriage, security. To appear dull, sickly, or aged was to risk being cast aside, forgotten, replaced. In such a world, a vial of belladonna was not a luxury but a necessity, as sharp-edged as a sword at the hip. Imagine the tension of such mornings. A noblewoman sits at her table, her maid preparing her paints and drops. She breathes deep, steadying herself. The mirror reflects both her hope and her fear. She knows each application of belladonna blinds her a little more. She knows the powders poison her flesh. And yet to arrive at the feast without them is unthinkable. The dance of beauty and poison is one she cannot refuse. Men were not immune. Courtiers powdered their faces, perfumed their hair, darkened their brows. Some too used drops to brighten their gaze, though fewer dared. Knights returned from battle scarred and sought unguents to smooth their faces, salves laced with herbs both healing and harmful. Beauty was a language spoken by both sexes, though the price fell heavier upon women. And beyond courts, poisons found subtler use. A vial of belladonna, easily explained as a cosmetic, could also serve another purpose. A drop stirred into wine could sicken or silence an enemy. A paste applied to lips could deliver poison with a kiss. The line between adornment and assassination blurred easily, the same vial serving both allure and death. Do you feel the strangeness of it? To stand in those chambers, surrounded by silks and perfumes, and know that the gleam in a lady's eyes, the pallor of her skin, the smoothness of her cheek are born of toxins. That the very signs of wealth and grace are masks painted with death. That beauty in this world is not gift but gamble. Step with me now into a banquet hall. Torches blaze, music plays, laughter rises. Ladies move among the crowd, their eyes dark and shining, their faces pale, their perfumes heavy in the air. Men bow, dazzled, whispering compliments. None sees the tremor in a hand, the faint blur in a gaze, the cough hidden behind a fan. Beauty has done its work. The poisons remain invisible, their toll exacted later, in silence. And in private chambers, behind closed doors, some noblewomen wept at the price. Diaries, rare, but real, speak of blindness creeping, of teeth falling, of skin blistered by powders. Some begged confessors for absolution, torn between vanity and fear. Others accepted their fate, resigned to the bargain. For in the end, their beauty had bought them years of power, of security, of admiration. What was blindness compared to obscurity? What was a shortened life compared to a forgotten one? So it was in the courts of Europe, where beauty was both crown and chain, both light and shadow. And in the glimmer of belladonna drops, in the dust of white lead, in the sheen of mercury washes, we glimpse again the central truth of the Middle Ages, that in a world of constant suffering, people reached for illusion, even at deadly cost. We leave the banquet hall now, the music fading, the perfumes lingering. The night deepens, and our journey nears its end. Ahead lies one final vision, one last truth to gather from these centuries of smoke and potion, of frenzy and silence. For all these illusions, of freedom, of beauty, of visions divine and demonic, speak to the same hunger. The hunger to escape pain, to touch another world, to find meaning beyond the harsh weight of survival. Come. Let us take the last steps together, into the final illusion, where the Middle Ages reveal their deepest secret, that behind every herb, every drop, every cloud of smoke, lay the human longing for release. The banquet lights fade, their torches sputtering into embers, and the halls grow still. Perfume clings to the air, faint now, like a ghost of beauty. Beyond the castle walls, the night is deep and wide, the fields silvered by moonlight, the roads silent. Our journey has wound through huts and hospitals, cloisters and kitchens, feasts and funerals, yet now, at the edge of dawn, all grows quiet. It is here, in this hush, that the Middle Ages reveal themselves most clearly, not in the noise of fairs or the frenzy of dances, but in the silence where memory lingers. And what does that memory show us? A world where pain was constant, fear unending, survival uncertain. A world where life was brief, where death walked in every shadow. And yet, a world where, in the midst of suffering, people found ways to dream, to hope, to escape. The illusions we have walked through were many. Physicians clung to humors, mixing herbs that soothed and killed alike. Families gave syrups of mercy that brought silence, sometimes forever. Monks fasted until visions came, mistaking hunger for angels. Festivals whirled into trances, bread turned poisonous, and bodies danced until they broke. Alchemists hunted immortality in bubbling flasks, priests swung censers heavy with smoke, sects chanted in barns, wanderers raved at crossroads. Noblewomen blinded themselves for beauty, parents hushed their children with deadly sleep. Each, in its way, was an illusion, and each an answer to the same hunger. For who, in such a world, would not crave escape? Who, bent by labor, racked by sickness, surrounded by loss, would not reach for a drop, a draught, a dream, even knowing it might destroy them? Illusion was not folly. It was survival. A cup of wine laced with mandrake did not cure the wound, but it dulled the pain. A haze of incense did not summon angels, but it gave the worshipper 1 hour of heaven on earth. A vision seen in trance or hunger did not change the world, but it gave meaning to chaos, hope to despair. Illusion was a lantern in the dark, fragile and flickering, yet enough to guide another step. And yet, illusions are double-edged. They comfort, but they deceive. They heal, but they harm. The Middle Ages lived always in that tension, between relief and ruin, between salvation and damnation. A mother's drop of poppy syrup soothed her child, but might steal its breath. A noblewoman's shining eyes dazzled the court, but at the cost of her sight. A dancer lost herself in ecstasy, but found only collapse. The line was thin, the gamble constant. Perhaps that is why the Middle Ages seem to us so strange, so unsettling. For we live in a world where illusion is optional, where pain can often be eased by science, where visions are dismissed as dreams. But for them, illusion was not pastime but necessity. Without it, the weight of life was too heavy. With it, the world shimmered, however briefly, with possibility. Pause here, on this quiet road at the edge of dawn. The fields stretch wide, the air is still. Imagine the countless souls who walk these paths before us. Peasants trudging to fields, monks on pilgrimage, merchants with packs, beggars with rags. Each carried within them not only hunger and fear, but also dreams, visions, illusions. The mother whispering to her child believed her syrup a blessing. The monk recording his visions believed them divine. The noblewoman gazing into her mirror believed her darkened eyes held the key to power. Illusion was not deception to them. It was truth, as real as the earth beneath their feet. And yet look closer. Was it truly illusion, or simply another kind of reality? When a monk saw angels in the incense haze, his heart leapt, his devotion deepened. Was that not real? When a peasant danced in frenzy, forgetting hunger, was that not freedom, however fleeting? When a dying man drank an alchemist's draught and felt his pain slip away, was that not mercy? Illusion and reality wove together, indistinguishable. To dismiss one as false and the other as true is perhaps our mistake. For them, both were part of the same tapestry. The final illusion, then, is not merely the visions of smoke or the dreams of drugs. It is the belief that life itself, harsh and brief, can be endured, if only one finds the right potion, the right prayer, the right dream. It is the illusion that something beyond suffering waits, whether in heaven, in beauty, in ecstasy, or in the bottom of a cup. And perhaps it is not illusion at all, but hope by another name. The sky pales. Dawn creeps over the horizon, touching the fields with light. Our journey through the medieval night comes to its end. We have walked among healers and heretics, dancers and dreamers, wanderers and nobles. We have breathed their smoke, tasted their syrups, seen through their eyes. And what remains is not laughter nor terror, but a quiet awe. For in their illusions we glimpse our own. Even now, do we not reach for escape? In glass, in pill, in dream, in screen? Do we not paint our faces, perfume our bodies, chase visions in different forms? The Middle Ages are gone, yet their longing lives on, the human desire to slip the weight of reality, to step into another world, if only for a moment. And so, as the sun rises, as fields glimmer and birds stir, we let the past fall silent. The illusions of the Middle Ages dissolve into mist, leaving only their echo. But that echo lingers, soft as smoke, sweet as incense, bitter as poppy, dark as nightshade. We live in another world now. Yet in every age, people search for their own escape into illusion. And so, as the night settles in memory, may these echoes of the past guide you gently into dreams,